To all of our listeners out there, I bet you got nervous that we had given up on this, but no, we don't give up that easily because we are the Rabbis podcast and you just can't stop us. I am your host, Rabbi Pinchas Landis of Partners Cleveland, and I am here with the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Rabbi Gamliel Nosson Halevi Spiro. Rabbi Spiro, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Rabbi Landis?
So good to speak to him. Again, we got so much good stuff going on, so busy, and look, that's part of the reasons why we haven't been recording as religiously as we used to, because Baruch Hashem, thank the good Lord, so many good things going on, so many good things to talk about today with just in Yonah Yoma. We have to review Pesach and hit on our takeaways from Pesach. We're in the midst of Sefira. We are heading towards Shavuos. We have Parshas Tazria Mitzorah, which is always a laugh a minute, and just so much to cover here today. So Rabbi Spiro, why don't you just update me, start me off, give me some good takeaways, some good golden nuggets from your Pesach, because I haven't even seen you barely since Pesach.
Right. So I'll start a nugget. I like that word. So one nugget I heard from Alexander Rebbe, which is that I've been thinking about a lot since Pesach, is he said a very good question. He said, "What's the difference between any nation that is worth anything looks at their history and thinks about their history? What's the difference between Klal Yisrael and our relationship with our history?" So he said a beautiful point. He said other nations were enslaved too. We're not unique that we were enslaved, but we do not emphasize our slavery. We emphasize our redemption. You never see just a mention of we were Mishubadim in Mitzrayim. You see always remember that you left Mitzrayim, right? And the God more about where's us Hashem lead B'tzeisi Mitzrayim. Tell your children on that day, Hashem did it for me when I left Mitzrayim. So it's such a great point of how to look at our own lives' experiences. It's very easy for every person to fall into the ideas of victimhood, right? This happened to me, it was so terrible, it was so bad, it was so awful, and to feel bad for himself. It's very easy to do that for any individual, for any nation, but the emphasis here is, no, we look back on when we left. Now, nothing was perfect when we left Mitzrayim. Just look, it's coming up soon. Look, Sefer Bamidbar, and Parshas Ba'alaitza, Parshas Shlach, Kairach, Chukas, Balak. Many mistakes were made in the desert, but nonetheless, we remember when we left Mitzrayim, remember when we went free. And that's such a good mussar for all of us, to remember the things in our life where we've experienced an element of redemption. Not to forget the difficult times, but it's through the difficult times, I think, that we appreciate the redemption. The difficult times are important too. They make us who we are, but at the same time, the primary focus has to be on us leaving Mitzrayim, on us and our redemption.
And it's interesting that even when we commemorate the Avdos, we're only we're instructed to do it really as it fits into the redemption. For example, the Haggadah itself, we say, Maschil b'Gnus u'Mesayim b'Shvach. We start with the Gnus, we talk about the Avdos, but you have to Mesayim b'Shvach. You have to end with the glory of Klal Yisrael. So we are really in glory season now. This is such a I feel like on so many levels, such a confusing time for the Jewish people. Because as you're talking about, we should be celebrating, the celebration of redemption really is supposed to continue for the whole Sefira. That's what the Sefira is. They're in the midst of right now. It's the counting, the anticipation from the physical exodus to essentially the spiritual exodus, from the Yetzias Mitzrayim to Kabbalas Torah, and it's supposed to be an extremely glorious time. And it's very confusing for myself, for sure, but for many, as to how do we deal with this concept that you said so beautifully about celebrating the redemption of the Jewish people? Meanwhile, we jump right into a period of Avelos, a period of mourning. which is a latter institution. It's 1,000 years later that the 1,000, 1,200 years later, 1,300 years later, the events happen to label this as a time period of mourning. It's very confusing, especially I know with my students who are coming from limited backgrounds, that they often they can't quite wrap their head around the whole thing. Like, okay, so Sefira ends on Lag BaOmer. I said, no. Sefira ends the day before Shavuos. Oh, so we can't shave the day before Shavuos? No, our custom is we can shave. It's like just so it's a happy time. No, it's a sad time. Oh, no, it's really a happy time. The dichotomy of this time is very confusing. And so how do we continue, Rabbi Spiro, like you said, to celebrate our redemption and the season of redemption? And it's in very, I don't know if it's officially Zman Cherusenu anymore because it's ER, but it is the time of Sefira, and Sefira in the classical sense, where on the flip side we have the latter addition of the Avelis during this time. And as I always point out, the institution of this as a time of Avelis started at the time period of the demise of the students of Rebbe Akiva, and that's what instituted it, both physically and spiritually, as a time period of peronios, a time period of difficulties for the Jewish people. But we see that it really continued from there. Part of that is somewhat technical. That in antiquity, they didn't really fight wars in the winter, and therefore they didn't wage pogroms against the Jewish people in the winter. They waited till it was nice out. And so when we talk about things like the Crusades and the different pogroms and Tach V'Tad and all these terrible things, this is the time period when it happened. So and they're not, as we know, nothing is a coincidence, nothing is unconnected. It started with the peronios of the time of Rebbe Akiva, but unfortunately continued on throughout history, that this, on one side, very happy time is a very dark time.
Very sad time. Right, so I think the answer is as follows. So it is, right. First, I use the word dichotomy, which is one of my favorite words. It's really, first of all, it's just a good word, which no one is 100% sure what it means. And the second thing, the reason why I like it
is brought to you by the word dichotomy.
It sounds smart. This time period is a dichotomy, and I think there's a few ways we can go with this. There's an interesting, I'll say this quickly, not to get too inside baseball, there's an interesting Balamar who talks about the question of, if you think about Sir Eimer in Chutz Aretz is a contradiction. The way we count the Eimer outside of Eretz Yisrael is a contradiction, because the carbon Eimer is really bought on the second day of Pesach when it's Chol Hamoed, and at the same time, we say the bracha on the second night when there's a Seder. So the Balamar, others figure out how to resolve this contradiction. It's called Tarti Desasri. Right? On the one hand, it's Yontif, and we're still having a second Seder. On the other hand, it's time to count the Eimer, meaning it's Chol Hamoed. And the answer is, I think, in the same question is asked really on Sukkot. Sukkot is Shmini Atzeres. We sit. Most people have the minhag. Many people have the minhag based on the Gemara, based on the Shulchan Aruch, to sit in the Sukkah and Shmini Atzeres. How's that? There's no bigger contradiction than that. You're making Shechianu on Shmini Atzeres. You're sitting in the Sukkah. So the answer is that Galus itself is a contradiction to our essence. That living in Galus, living in exile, is a contradiction. It's like a husband and wife who can't live in the same house together. It's not the way it's supposed to be. So we're supposed to remember this time of year that in an idyllic sense, we should be living in Eretz Yisrael. It should be one long Chol Hamoed, as the Ramban says. It should be a time of intense spiritual closeness to Hashem. Instead, it's become a time of mourning. But this idea of mourning is what will ultimately bring the Gula. If we think about the reasons why we mourn, which we'll speak about in a moment, this is really the harbinger of what will cause Mashiach to come when we repair what it is. And what we know, what's the reason? So the Gemara says in Yavamas, during this time, 24,000 Hamina Rabbi Akiva died. Like Nagu Kavod, they did not treat each other with proper kavod. Right? And we know, there's different ways a person could look at the Torah. There's mitzvahs b'dam l'chaveroi, between man and fellow man, mitzvah b'dam l'makom, mitzvah between man and Hashem. But really, they're all one. Right? The reality is the mitzvahs in the Torah are one unified theory. And if we're lacking in some, we're lacking in others. And if the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva if the students of Rabbi Akiva couldn't treat each other with the proper respect, that means there was something missing in their Kabbalas HaTorah. So now, every year, we relive this time period and do actions that build us back up and put bricks in place to ultimately build up that Beis Hamikdash, right? And every door with some degree of building the Beis Hamikdash, that's what we're doing this time of year. If we use it properly, and i.e., I think the most important thing to do is to treat each other with respect. I just want to tell you a beautiful thing I heard from Rabbi Nissim Rottenberg, a Maridik idea from the Sefer Reish Chachma. Reish Chachma is a very harsh, intense sefer. Actually, very intense sefer, not for the average layman. It's for someone like you, Rabbi Landis. A lot of strong musar. Masechtas Gehenim, the Masechta that deals with hell, is in there. So it's very intense stuff, but it brings it's in there. A few years ago, a guy in my yeshiva begged me to learn it with him. I actually learned it with him. Not a great experience. Extremely scary. I just have a sefer right over here. The Reish Chachma. So the Reish Chachma, I want to read to you what he says here. Something very powerful. He talks. There's different Gemaras. We know that namely the Gemara in Shabbos that talks about what Hashem asks a person when he goes to the Olam Emes. What a person asks Hashem when he goes to the world of truth. Then he brings here another thing that's asked of a person. That the Malach HaMavos asks him a question. What does he ask them? Asakta b'targum chasadim. Were you Isaac in Torah? Did you help out your fellow man? Himlachta lekonecha b'shachar arvis. Did you make Hashem king over you in the morning and at night? I think referring to Kriya Shema. Now listen to this one. Himlachta es chavercha b'nachas ruach. Did you crown your friend over you? In other words, one of the keys to being a good person, a happy person, a successful person, to being the way we want Hashem to be, us to be, is are we able to accept our friend over us even at certain times? Right? That's the idea of amlacha. You accept, and I think that's there's no Jew who's perfect. There's never been a Jew who's perfect, never will be a Jew who's perfect. I mean, we all have components that we're great in and that we're not so great in, and our friends are mashlim us, right? The Maharal speaks about that. That's why there's so many mitzvahs. Some people excel in certain mitzvahs, some excel in other mitzvahs. It's Maharal and Tiferes Yisrael. So I think this idea of, are you able to look at your friend and see he has milas over you, he has qualities that you don't have, and accept that from him. Doesn't mean you don't have qualities he doesn't have. But if a person can live like that, I think that's the purpose of the Omer. That's how we're supposed to, in this time period, be thinking about those issues. Be thinking about how we can relate to our friends better, more respectfully, more happily, greet them nicely, and that is really one of the keys. That was what the error of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim was, and that's what we have to rectify.
I heard a beautiful idea once from Rabbi Pesach Kron. I'm not sure where he got it from, but it's a little bit of a Chassidish take on the bracha that we say, numerous times every day, the bracha B'rei Nefashos. So the words of the bracha are B'rei Nefashos Rabos V'Chasranan, which, the Gemara and Brachos, the Rishonim talk about the different ideas behind exactly what we're saying. But the Chassidish word is that B'rei Nefashos Rabos V'Chasranan, that the Almighty created many souls with their shortcomings. All kol ma shebarasa lahachayos behem, but everything that was created by the Almighty, that's what's needed to live. So this idea that Klal Yisrael is like a symphony, just like in a symphony. Rabbi Spiro, I know that in your dream is to play the triangle at Severance Hall. I know you've been trying out for that position for years, and I know you've made callbacks, but you've never quite made the cut. And I'm rooting for you this year. That hopefully the Severance Hall, the world famous symphony will open, and you'll be there playing the triangle. I'm pulling for you. But we know that if you want to have a symphony of just triangles or just percussions, it would sound pretty weird. You'd end up with this show called Stomp, right? This Broadway show a couple years ago was all percussions. It was weird, right? But you need the wind section, the string section, the percussion. So Klal Yisrael, we need the the Talmidei Chachamim like Rabbi Spiro. We need the average chaps like myself. We need Sephardim, Ashkenazim, Hasidim, Misnagdim. We need it all because it makes up the symphony of Klal Yisrael. And I think that's beautiful what you're saying. I think it's exactly what you're saying from the Reish Chachma, that this time of year, it's that especially during the time period of Kabbalas Torah. We have the concept of the Memches Devarim, the 48 ways that we acquire the Torah. And, there are those who are Zoche do it all 48 ways, but not everyone does it all 48 ways. Some people do it 39 ways. Rabbi Spira, I know you do it 67 ways. I know how you do it.
I do it
but
in 3 ways.
But,
every year, I always, Baron Cutler used to always say that you should. These 48 days are meant to review the 49 days are meant to review the 48 ways. So I wish I did it.
Right. You review the first 48, and then the day before she was supposed to review all 48. I think is what he says. Right. And Rav Weinberg wrote a sefer on this actually called "The 48 Ways," an English art school book about these 48 ways. But this is also the concept of. I remember hearing a wonderful shmooze once from Nassim Tzvi Finkel's at Saul, where he was talking about the concept of tefillah, and he said a line that has just stuck with me all these years. And he said that the idea of tefillah b'tzibur, praying with a minyan, it's not hidur mitzvah. It's not being like extra frum. It's not beautifying the mitzvah. It's not doing it better. It's me'ikr adin. It's the halacha, right? It's me'ikr adin that a person is supposed to daven with a minyan. B'diavad, like if you can't, because of a certain situation you can't have a minyan, okay, then you can daven b'chidus. But lichatchila, the way that a Jew davens, the Jewish man davens, is with a minyan. Why? Same concept. What we're saying that you have a choice of when you go before the Almighty and pray to the Almighty, you can fly solo, or you can have at least 9 other people help you out. Like which one are you going to take, right? And that's why it's not only like it's a nice thing. No, it's me'ikr adin. And I was trying to explain this to somebody who was being somewhat critical, really an unfounded criticism, but somewhat critical on in our communities. We push so hard to open up the shuls a year ago already at Shavuos time, while the pandemic was still raging, because it's kihem chayeno, right? Like this person was saying that it's what you could daven b'yachidus, you could daven by yourself. I said no. We don't want to. You don't strive to do things b'diavad if you don't have to. Sure, if you have to, you have to, right? When the quarantine orders and the shutdown orders were in place, we had to. We didn't have a choice. But now, I can't believe it's been almost a year. But once we have the opportunity, just like a shopping at the store was essential business, and going to the doctor, let's say, was essential business, and Rabbi Spira is still wearing masks even over digital conversations. Yeah, there you go. He wears masks everywhere.
The one thing I'll tell you about COVID, the news is never good. Every time you look at it, you're like, the worst. I saw news the other day. It was like, don't think it's getting better. The worst is yet to come. I'm like, okay. I'm not sure I believe that, but okay.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means anymore. Whatever. I'm so done talking about COVID.
I will let everyone know that Rabbi Landis is an anti-vaxxer, and he's a massive conspiracy theorist. And he told me the other day that he believes that vaccine.
Along these lines, hold on. By the way, along the lines we were saying, hold on 1 second.
I feel surprised.
You know what I have right here, Rabbi Spiro? I'm going to show something for all our guests here. This is going to be a special plug for something very, very special. And you don't even know what I'm going to pull out here, do you?
I do, actually.
Ready? This is, you know what this is? This is the new sefer by Rabbi Shragi Weimer, right? And you see what it's called?
Really?
Laser Beam, the sequel. It's the Jewish space laser right here. We finally figured it out. Rabbi Weimer is the Jewish space. He's in charge of the Jewish space laser. We figured it out from his new book, right here. So yeah, conspiracy theories, anti-vaxxer. Yeah, well, just we need to clarify here for anyone who's watching with us. Here's my vaccine card. I'm fully vaccinated, got both shots, and had COVID, so I had antibodies before that. But whatever.
And you still should wear a mask, though.
I wear a mask in the shower, by the way. Yeah, still wear a mask. Anyhow, Vito.
So yes, so it is. Look, it's always hard. It's easy sometimes to talk about theory. Pesach ended. This is what I'm taking with me. It's not. It's easier to talk about it than to actually do it. We all know that. But I think if a person just thinks every night by Sefira, whenever they bench Sefira in the evening, man or woman, just to think about that moment, and think about ways we can improve ourselves, and B, more than that, think about different ways that or let me put it a little differently. Think about the idea of the fact that we're counting. One of the things we always talk about, we cannot emphasize it enough. We're mourning something that happened really 2,000 years ago, right? The story happened to Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim around the time, actually a little bit less than 2,000, close to like 1960 years ago, whatever year it was, maybe a little less than that even, but a very long time ago. And we're still mourning, still thinking about it. And I'm sure you've heard the theory that...
I just did the math. It was 1,886 years ago, in case you were wondering.
Oh, really?
Because year 135 is when it happened. So
I'm sure you know the theory that the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died or killed by Bar Kokhba, in the Bar Kokhba revolt, not by Bar Kokhba, in the Bar Kokhba revolt. I don't buy that because the Gemara says askara. The Gemara says an illness. Now, to counter that claim, some say that, well, they couldn't write down that they were killed by the Romans because the Romans censored the Gemara. Would the Romans care? I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I'll tell you, I want to hear your point, but I'll say that doesn't bother me because okay, let me hear your point, and I'll tell you my
no,
2 cents.
You know what? The truth is, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. It doesn't, regardless,
right.
whether it was an epidemic, and we now all know the difference between a pandemic and epidemic. So whether it was an epidemic called Askara, some sort of, respiratory epidemic that they had no vaccine for, which is basically what the Gemara describes, as some sort of like closing of the throat and, some throat
Sounds
illness.
terrible. When the Gemara describes it, doesn't it sound horrible?
Horribly painful, right? Whether it was that or it was that the Romans came and wiped out the whole yeshiva, the yeshiva size of Ohio State University, Lahavdil, or or the size of a huge university, Lahavdil. It doesn't matter, and that's how I look at it. And I teach both, actually. I say the Gemara says Askara. There's others that say it was Bar Kokhba, but it's still a calamity, and therefore there's still the lesson to take.
Either way, it's right. Yeah. The truth is, I think it actually fits in beautifully this week's parsha. One of the main. This
is your favorite parsha, right? This week's parsha.
It's a great parsha, happens to be. Every parsha is great. When you're a kid, obviously certain parshas. I remember as a kid, it would I'd be like, oh, now the rest of the Torah is boring. That's what I would think, because all the stories really finish. Shmini has Bnei Nadav and Avihu, but obviously it's not true, and it's just it was kid thoughts. But one of the things we learn from Mitzrayim more than anything else, I think, is doing averas, speaking bad about other people, for example. That does have a physical manifestation of evil. We're not connected. We're not in a spiritual enough world to see it, but the reality is it does cause a skin defect. And even today, if you had the right, especially one of the things we've learned from COVID is this idea of this unseeable, unidentifiable, unless you have a microscope, little germ, untraceable, unknowable. I sat there with a video camera. I sat there with my old JVC video camera trying to video pieces of the COVID. And then I videoed and put in my VCR. I could not detect anything. So it's very, very small. Very small. But it's very small, and that's the truth. But these things do have an effect, and we don't always see them. But they have.
I think you're right. That's the very clear lesson. Like, why does the Torah spend so much press on this concept of tsaras? Because first of all, it was a reality, and I shouldn't even say it was in a idealistic time. It's a reality. And therefore, the Torah needs to spend time on it. But it's that idea that you said that tsaras is better than everything, better than anything else. The umbilical connection between the Olam Ruchni and the Olam Gashmi. That when we do something negative, that it has a real effect, right? It affects the metaphysics, and quite often the metaphysics affects the physics. Right? I started a new series. We wrapped up the 10 Steps to the New You, which was a blast. And we started the Jewish Destiny series. And it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. I started with Brias HaOlam. Yeah, I was very excited to do it. I've wanted to do it for years, and I've tried it in a couple of different ways, shapes, and forms. But like I said, finally decided I'm doing it the way I want to do it, exactly how I want to do it. And we had the second session last night. So we were talking about the concept of Brias Olam, right? The first session was why learn Jewish history. Last night was Brias Olam, which was really the conversation of science and Torah. Right, and I explained how science has never contradicted Torah, and it's a misnomer to think that there's a contradiction, and the creationists don't have Torah Shal Peh, so it doesn't make sense to them, etc., etc. These are the concepts we said. But the one thing that I said is clear that we need to take from the creation story, and which is all 31 verses in the Torah, right? And the Harvard Library, there's 200,000 books on creation, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu to write it down in 31 verses, right? Like that's all we got. Obviously, it's not supposed to be the whole story, but the one lesson's very clear that there is a connection between the Olam Ruchni and the Olam Hagashmi. And that's one of the main things we're supposed to take out of it. And whether you learn, and again, whether you learn Ramban, Maharal, or more Pshuta Shemikra like Rashi, however you're learning the story over there, you definitely come out with seeing there's a clear connection between physicality, the physical world, and spirituality, the spiritual world. And therefore, there's an effect. I'll tell you an amazing story. I'll tell you just along these lines how sometimes the Kodesh Baruch Hu just opens our eyes and shows us things. We're about to kick off the Partners into our annual campaign. We're doing it as a 33-hour campaign on April 25th, starting off with our annual event with His Honorable Yosef Al-Odal. That seems so hard for me to remember, right? Otaba, the ambassador of the United Arab Emirates of America, and Malcolm Hoenlein, the vice president of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations, which I'm trying to get onto. I'm really just trying to because I want to be on the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. And anyhow, but I was having like a hard time getting started because how these campaigns go, you got to like call your big donors first and get them kind of lined up, and they're doing part of the matching part of it and this and that. It was just having a hard time with some things. And a friend of mine called me and asked me for help with something, and he wanted to pay me for it, but I said no. You're my friend. I want to help you out with this. I'm not going to charge you. I just want to do it for you. I want you to be successful in what you're doing. Literally, I hang up the phone. I had to call one of my donors really about something totally different, but we got to talk about the campaign. So I wasn't even really calling him to make the ask, but we got to talk about the campaign, and he said, here's what I'm doing for you this year. And he tripled his gift from last year, and his gift last year was very nice, and he tripled it, just like that. So literally, that's the connection between the spiritual and the physical world. Here, it's the concept of v'nosnu, right? That when you give, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives back to you. And that's a physical, spiritual connection. Here, I gave to someone in the physical world, it connected to the spiritual world, and it turned right back to give to me or give to my organization. And it's a reality. That's the reality of the world.
Very nice, and we're looking forward to the program.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. It's going to be quite exciting. I'm very upset because I heard that His Excellency is not wearing the robes. He's wearing a suit, and I tried to ask him to wear the robes, and they almost called off the whole thing when I asked for that. But anyhow,
really?
It'll be great. No, I didn't bring it up.
All right.
Yeah. Anyhow, so Rabbi Sefira, any parting thoughts? This has been wonderful to reconnect and to really touch on these topics of Sefira and how they connect to Tezria Mitzora and Pesach, and just bring it all home. But any closing thoughts before we send our listeners on their way for today?
I'll just say a brief thought that today is the 17th day of the Omer. And when people see this, I don't know if it'll still be the 17th day, but today is the 17th day.
Probably not.
That's Tiferes, Shabbat Tiferes. Right, the word Tiferes basically means it could mean a lot. All of them mean a lot of things. One of the things it means is harmony. It means beauty, right? But the lashon used in Sefer Yeshaya is Ma'aseh Yadei Lispire. Right, Klal Yisrael is my result of my handiwork to take pride in them. So the Medrash Rabbah says in Koheles that always to remember that Hashem takes pride in us. So I think a good way to this time of year, of course, improvements need to be made. They always do, but also to have that underlying feeling of that Hashem is proud of us.
Beautiful, beautiful. And he is, indeed. And Rabbi Spiro, I hope you keep making him proud. I'm going to keep trying to make him proud, do my best. And it's good to get back in the saddle.
I'm proud of you, Rabbi.
What's that?
I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you too, Rabbi Spiro.
Thank you.
Let's now sit around and sing Kumbha Kal. Anyhow, okay, we're going to wish everyone out there a great week, a great Shabbos. We're hoping to get this out before Shabbos and get the Tezrah and the Torah insights and the Sefira insights. Everyone have a great week, a beautiful week. God willing, we'll be back next week for another jam-packed episode of the Rabbis Podcast. And we just wish you nothing but happiness and wonderful things and growth in this time period of real growth from the Exodus, from Yetzias Mitzrayim to Kabbalas Torah to the receiving of the Torah. And we wish you all a great Shabbos and a great week.